Okay, let's start video numero dos. Since we're talking about Spanish and Portuguese, we can use Spanish language to talk about it. We'll look at Americo Vespucci, an Italian cartographer who is going to be hired by the Portuguese to sail along the coast of South America. And he's going to write journals about his voyages to Brazil and map those areas stretching down the eastern coast of South America and up into the Caribbean, Central America. And it's really going to give people a very good idea of what really the Americas started to look like. Because of this, when he writes in his journals that he has been mapping what Columbus had found, which is a new world, this whole new kind of place that had never been seen before, he will be honored much later by other cartographers with a name, using his first name as a name for the new continents that are found, the Americas, and that was how they named the Americas after Americo Vespucci. So he's going to be huge in the map making process. Okay. Another Spanish explorer is going to be Vasco Núñez de Balboa. He is going to, like many of the other explorers, come over, follow the path of Columbus and follow the path of Vespucci, and he is going to go into Panama, which is a small isthmus that connects South America with North America, and obviously where our Panama Canal is today, that allows ships to move back and forth between the Atlantic and the Pacific. With the locals and his exploratory crew, he is going to see the Pacific Ocean for the first time. Now, he is not going to name it the Pacific. It's going to be named that much later by Magellan. But Balboa is going to see it. He's going to write in his journals when he returns to Spain. He speaks of this grand ocean that is on the other side of the continent, which will inspire, of course, Magellan to go off on his conquests and his sailing opportunities. Alright, so let's look at Ferdinand Magellan. Now, Ferdinand Magellan is a Portuguese sailor who is sailing for Spain. Nothing like sailing for your rival. Of course, if the rival pays more money and gives you a better opportunity, it's probably a good idea to sail. So he's going to sail for Spain, and his goal is to circumnavigate. That's what he wants to do. The first part is he's got to reach the southern tip of South America. Now, he's going to go through mutinies. He is going to go through lost ships. He's going to go through burning ships. This is not going to be a simple trip for Ferdinand Magellan by any means. But he is going to get down through the straits that really kind of are located down at the southern part of South America, which will be later named the Straits of Magellan because he does get through them. And he is going to sail into the Pacific Ocean, which he names Pacific, which is a Latin word for peaceful. If you think about the word pacify or pacifist, that comes from this idea. But the Pacific Ocean is much more peaceful. What Magellan does not know really is how large is the Pacific Ocean. He knows where he wants to go, and his next stop is going to be somewhere near the Spice Islands, and his last stop is going to be in the Spice Islands. However, he does not know the expanse of the ocean itself, but he is going to make his way towards the Philippines, and he's going to go towards the Spice Islands and land in the Philippines, where he's going to make the grave mistake of getting wrapped up in a local civil war that is going on, and on the Philippines, Magellan is killed, and the rest of his crew is forced to leave. Now, fortunately, once they're in the Philippines and they're in the South China Sea, they're familiar with where they are, and they're able to get into the Indian Ocean trade basin, get back around Africa, and head on their way back to Spain. After 3 years of sailing, 18 men will return, one ship, and they will officially circumnavigate the globe. Again, even though Magellan is the one who does not make it, the significance of his trip, the plan of his trip, where they went, what they chronicle, what they've journaled, really shows the expansiveness of the globe and really what's out there. And it really begins to push this global exploration idea, not just of the Spanish and the Portuguese, but of the French and the Dutch and the English are going to move themselves around the world very rapidly, trying to establish colonial kingdoms and colonial empires, which will lead to another time period down the road in imperialism. All right, last few parts of this early section here, part two. Portugal's going to gain parts of Africa. When they gain parts of Africa, they're going to establish ports, and in those ports, they're going to start to work in a new type of trade to deal with the labor issue that they're finding in the Americas be very difficult, which is the death of indigenous people due to disease, which opens up the African slave trade. They are going to trade with chieftains of African tribes, goods like rum and guns, in exchange for slaves, and then try to enslave hundreds of thousands of Africans and bring them over to the Americas to do the work for them on the plantations, which are going to bring crops like sugar and tobacco, wild rice, cotton, many other production type goods, sweet potatoes, whatever the case may be. That's going to require laborious work, of which slaves are going to be, African slaves are going to be incredibly important to. With African slaves, you understand about Africans, one, they are used to Europeans, so that means they're immune, which is the second part, immune to diseases from the Europeans, and thirdly, they can't escape, they can't run away because they're literally 3,000 plus miles away from home. So in saying this, the Africans are kind of stuck in this slave trade. It's going to make the Europeans very, very rich, very, very profitable. Whereas you have on the flip side the indigenous people of the Americas, what is known as the Great Dying, where hundreds of thousands of indigenous natives are going to die due to old world diseases like smallpox and measles and mumps and typhus that are really going to cause detriment. Even the common cold is going to cause a lot of detriment to those people and kill them off. All right, and because of this, you have the English, French, and Dutch also beginning to colonize in Africa, in the Indian Ocean, in the Caribbean. They're going to start to expand as well. All right, so let's look at the Dutch real quick. The Netherlands, which was a country really established by the people there who dug themselves up from the North Sea to create fertile farmland for them to live. So the Dutch are about 1.5 million people living there. They are seafaring people. They have access, the canals in Amsterdam. They have access to the North Sea. They're going to be very, very instrumental in pushing navies and also pushing trade and commercialism and really capitalism as a whole. So they are going to build themselves a mighty sea power, one that's going to compete with both the Spanish and the Portuguese on a global scale. Okay, they are going to establish what is known as the Dutch East India Company. Essentially, the Dutch East India Company is going to go into the Indian Ocean trade basin around 1602, and they are going to dominate the Portuguese because of their power of their ships. And really, they're going to be able to do this because of capitalism. They're going to have interest rates that are created for people to invest in, and of course, the businesses are strong, so they're going to pay back money to the companies that are loaning money, which is going to make the Dutch East India Company very, very profitable. The everyday person can really invest in the Dutch East India Company, and because they're a year's travel away from the Netherlands, the Dutch East India Company is going to act as its own, essentially as its own country within a country idea. And they're going to capture ports. They're going to be very, very violent and very, very warlike in what they do to gain economic profit. So in saying that, they're going to take away essentially Portuguese control of the Indian Ocean trade basin. They're going to open up trade with China, which has many more luxury goods. They're going to look into Indonesia, which is going to be very, very powerful for them, very profitable. And they're going to be the only European country that's able to connect to Japan, which opens up silver mines and other types of resources there. So the Dutch, for roughly 100 years, are going to be extremely powerful as we move away from the Portuguese into different ideas of exploration, which are not just based in God, glory, and gold, but in this case just based in wealth, and the Dutch will become very rich because of it. The Spanish will seize the Philippines. Of course, that is where Magellan was killed, but this is going to be an outpost, and it gives them control in the South China Sea, and because of the Philippines, they'll have access to China, Hong Kong, Macau, and those areas in the South China Sea. That's, again, going to make the Spanish very profitable. When they do this, they're going to convert locals to Catholicism, again, spreading the idea of God to the people, taking the native indigenous and giving them a religion that is theirs, again, based in Ferdinand and Isabella and their family members. Later on, Philip II, that's going to look for power, but it's also spreading the Word of God, at least in this idea, the Word of Catholic God and Catholic Christianity. Okay, and what this will do is the Philippines are going to act as an intermediary. They're going to bring what is happening in the Americas from the Spanish to China. They're going to come across the Pacific Ocean to the Philippines and begin to trade more directly with China, which is going to, again, cut out the middleman of the Dutch, cut out the Portuguese, and bring Spain a lot of power and a lot of wealth. The silver mines that are going to be found down in Colombia are going to become very profitable for the Chinese because it's going to go through the Philippines, go through Japan, and make their way to Chinese merchants. Okay, so in saying that, we got to look at the conquerors, the conquistadors, and there's two main conquistadors we really need to focus on because of what they do is really going to change the focus of the Spanish, and it really kind of adds to the aura of the Spanish as really violent, colonizing, conquering type people that really did not care much about the indigenous or what they were. They wanted the land and the wealth off the land. All right, so the first one I'm going to look at is Hernan Cortez. And Hernan Cortez had already made the trip to the New World. He had actually settled in Cuba and was a landowner there. And he had been reading stories essentially about explorers going into an area called Mexico, which was nearby Cuba, and the lack of success that they had had there. So he believed that if he were to go and take men with him, that he could repel these native peoples and really take control of that Central American stronghold of a group of people called the Aztecs. Alright, so his plan is to go to their city, their main city of Tenochtitlan, which had been a major metropolitan city, huge for trade in the Aztec Empire, and you'll have notes and a video to watch in the Aztec Empire another time. But they're going to take Tenochtitlan, and Tenochtitlan is significant because it is set in the middle of a lake. There's only 2 causeways that can get you to the city, or you have to go by boat, so it is very difficult. But because Cortez was extremely confident, in other words to explain that, he thought he was going to be able to take these people and subjugate them, and he'll be successful, he'll be right. So when he lands in Mexico, he is assisted by a woman named Malinche, who had dealt with other Spaniards before and actually had learned the Spanish language. So he had someone who could translate for him. And as he goes along, he begins to make alliances with other Aztec groups that are kind of on the outskirts of the empire that had rebelled against the Aztec king Moctezuma and the main Central Aztec empire, and were willing to fight with him to overthrow Moctezuma because some of the policies that Moctezuma had implemented. Okay, and here is Moctezuma. He is the second King Moctezuma II, the second Moctezuma king of the Aztec Empire. Now, when Moctezuma comes into contact with Cortez, and he knows Cortez is coming, he believes Cortez is not a Spaniard looking to take over, but one of their gods of Aztec culture, a god by the name of Quetzalcoatl. And in the Aztec story, Quetzalcoatl is sent out of the Aztec area, and is believed that he will come back to save his people, and he will come back as a white bearded god wearing armor essentially. And here comes Cortez, who is a white bearded god who's wearing armor, and the last big part was this person comes from the east, and here is Cortez sailing in from the east. So Montezuma, even though he knows that this person possibly could be trouble, is actually viewing Cortez as a god, which is going to give Cortez a very major upper hand. Okay, what Cortez becomes interested in, of course, is the gold and silver he was being given by Moctezuma, and Montezuma actually shows Cortez where all the gold and silver was, and one of the greatest mistakes of history, which is going to give Cortez a major advantage over the Aztecs. And of course, the big advantage that the Spanish have over the Aztecs are the guns, and the guns are going to be a big deal, and more importantly, the disease that's brought over. Alright, so Cortez is going to trick Montezuma and imprison him, and begins to take his riches. Now, what Cortez doesn't understand is there are more conquistadors from Spain coming to show up to take over Cortez as well. Even though they're from the same country, this is not a group deal. This is going to be who is getting glory, who is getting fame, and who is getting power. So the Spanish are run out of the city. However, Montezuma, being seen as a traitor to his people, is thrown off a building and dies, and is left in the streets for over a week to rot and suffer because of what he did to his people. Now, the biggest thing is when Cortez does return, he notices that Tenochtitlan is no longer the biggest powerful city that is there. Most of the Aztecs had died, and he didn't understand because there was no conflict going on, but what killed them all was the amount of disease that had been spread and left behind by the Spanish conquerors. So when that becomes the case, Cortez is able to subjugate those who are left. He destroys what is Tenochtitlan and rebuilds the city for the Spanish king called Mexico City, which is the capital of Mexico today, and become a very powerful trading city for the Spanish empires as we move forward. We're going to talk about Pizarro here in the next video.